your first time, so we're just going to let people know how we do things here. We like to interact with the audience. So if we're talking about something and you have a question, raise your hand. We'll try to get to you. It's fairly easy, straightforward. If you have some questions that are a little bit more specific, like, well, in my story, I am doing this, one particular thing, and you want to talk with us afterwards. If we have the time, it's probably better just to hold your question until afterwards if it's a little bit more specific like that. We also have, this year, we have been posting stuff on Fanfiction, so if after the con, you want to go back and talk with people, communicate, maybe you sat next to someone and you want to, you can't remember their name, you can go there and you can actually find a post for this, this panel. And you can actually find people and talk about this topic here, so if you want to continue the discussion after the con, you can still do that, which we hope that people will take advantage of. And you can find that group on Fanfiction. It's just the group Everfree Readers and Writers. So we are going to get started. This is the panel Fanfiction, the community and you, and it focuses on reaching out to others, because as a lot of us know, a community is more than just the numbers of people that you follow and who follow you. The community is, for a lot of us, what actually keeps us in. More than the numbers, it's the people and the friends that we've made and the people we interact with regularly. And so in that spirit, we've gotten a variety of panelists here. I'm Heiko Pai, I'm the head of the writing track. And here we have Pen Stroke, who is the who has made a name for himself by being the most followed author on Fanfiction. And then we have Dusk Watch, who is an accomplished editor. And editor and pre-reader, or just editor?
I do both, actually, editing and pre-reading, but a lot of the times it's just editing. So
awesome. And then we also have Zephyr down at the end, who's actually who's actually the third in the writing track chain of command, and he'll be running some panels later. So this is actually going to be his first panel. So let's give him a big round of applause. And he has done a great job reaching out to the community, because he does our Fanfiction spotlights, which we do once a week on Fanfiction. He helped. I mean, he came to a con and started talking to the people, and that's how I met him. And that's actually why he became the third, is because I read what he did for the Iron Authors competition, and we had some good in-depth conversations, and it's obvious that he knew what he was talking about, and so I wanted to bring him on, and that's what community is about. I mean, it's networking. I mean, when you go to college, they say a college degree is important, but a lot of people who actually get jobs will say networking is as or more important than just going to college.
And just as a side note, he's terrible as an author because he still hasn't given us anything new to edit for a while.
I've been working on Everfree stuff. I'm telling you.
We're hoping to shame him into getting more of a whole.
It's coming, I promise.
See, friends right there already. And so what we want to do is we want to help people figure out how to reach out. Maybe you have a favorite author like Penstroke or one of the other ones of us, and you want to just reach out and say hi, say thank you, stuff like that. And it's things like, it's okay to do that. It's just say, you know what, thank you for writing this. If you were having a bad day and it cheered you up, let the authors know, because that is more important than 1,000 likes on any site. Is having one person write back to you and say, hey, I really like this. And you know what, if you have a comment, you're like, I really like how you did this, but I'm wondering why you did that. Let them, ask. It's always okay to ask, right?
Yeah.
That's how most of us get involved in it, I think, is just reaching out to people and going, hey, I like what you did. I realize that a lot of people are bad-mouthing it, and there clearly are some issues with it, but at the same time, it's got some merit.
Well, and even the really good stories. I mean, I would say early on, Pastons was one of the best stories at the time when it was coming out, and it still holds up pretty good compared to, we have people coming in, oh, I'm an actual author and I went to college and stuff like that, and this is technically incorrect. It's writing. I mean, people have different styles and different things that they like, and if something, if you follow an author and you're wondering why they went in a different direction, I mean, you can talk about that with them.
Why did you look at me like that when you did that? It was that literally different direction.
I don't know, I've gone in a different direction. You went to BabsCon. That's a different direction. That's south. No, BabsCon.
No, for me, this and BabsCon are both the same direction, because they're both north.
Yeah. We actually have a super trampoline there in the back, so we're going to give him a hard time about volunteering at BabsCon as the writing track lead there every once in a while. But No, I mean, we're from different cons. We're here because we like literature. So what are some of the things that, let's start at the end there. What are some of the things that you like to talk about, like that matter to you about the community, Zephyr? Like how do you reach out and get reached out to?
Well, I mean, I'll certainly start off by saying that, I mean, you mentioned the community is definitely what keeps me involved in this. Honestly, if I never met a voice actor, I would be totally okay with that. The creativity in this community is what's amazing to me and what keeps me in this fandom. And the fan fiction extension of that, because as a writer, that's where I find my home. So knowing and meeting all sorts of people, that being able to talk about pony words and this ridiculous, crazy stuff we do on a serious level with people is just amazing. And fan fiction and the writing community is one of the great places about that. Like Pico was mentioning earlier, one of the most important things is that feedback. I mean, likes and favorites are great and all, and it's great to look at numbers and say, oh, most followed and most views and all this. But if you let it all be about stats, that's no good. Say you like a story. The few words that says, I really enjoyed this story and it made my day, like you said, goes so much farther than just simply clicking numbers and increasing some stats. Anyone can up spreadsheets, play WoW if you want to do that. If you want to interact with people, talk to them. And to me, that's the biggest part of community interaction. Just be involved. If you don't like something, say it. If you like it, say it. You meet people that way.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of, there's a lot of that just fan fiction stuff that we get because it keeps us going in the off season. There is a tremendous amount of creativity, as Zephyr said. So that's all well and good, but at the same time, it really is just reaching out to people. I've had people on Fanfiction that have posted things on their blogs that I have followed that have said, you know, I've gotten a ton of negative feedback on this, or I feel like I'm not progressing as a writer, those kinds of things. And it's amazing how much impact you can make just by reaching out to those people and not even just commenting on their stuff, but actually take the time to send them a private message. It's a good way to build more community, and it also will land you if you want to get into editing or pre-reading or anything like that. That's one of the best ways to do it. That's how I got to pre-read for Zephyr over here on Holden Sons. I read it a while back and I sent him a message and I noticed there were a couple of, you know, really nitpicky minor grammatical things. I would love to pre-read for you, and I think that was when it only had, what, 3 chapters?
Yeah, that was a ways back, yeah.
Like chapter 3, and it's, well, what, 20-something, I think?
Well, if you include the sequel, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, if we include the sequel, I think it's up to 20 chapters. And so I've been on that project now for a while, and I just emailed them and said, hey, I really like the story, I'd like to pre-read for you. There's a couple of minor nitpicky things, and that's how we ended up becoming friends. So, and then, you know, here we are. So
I can definitely echo what these guys are saying about it's like, and just past sins alone, it's like I've gotten it for other stories, but like past sins, I've gotten not just personal messages on Fanfiction, but I put my author email at the bottom of each chapter, and I've gotten emails there that are like, this is like, past sins for some people is the gateway fic. It's like, it's the one that gets them reading other fan fiction, and that's really cool for me, because like, hey, I'm getting other authors, some viewers now too, because people was like, I don't know about fan fiction. Oh, this one's really good, I'll go try other ones. It's like, it's that first hit. It's that first hit before they go.
First one's always free.
Exactly.
And it depends too, because there's ones out there that are fantastic, like Past Sins or Life and Times of a Winning Pony, or Hole in the Sun, that are fantastic. Or the first one I think I ever read that was really got me going was Song of Storms of Skies Long Forgotten by Pegasus Rescue. Was that PRB? I think that was PRB that I got it from. I could be wrong, it might be 24th Pegasus. But anyway, there's really good ones out there. At the same time, I've read some stories that I've gotten 3 paragraphs sitting on like, I'm done with this one. So they can be really bad too.
And if you are a fan of someone's writing and you interact with them, and then maybe you decide, you know, that you have a story that's ready to post for the first time, or you have something, maybe you wrote a side story to Past Sins or something, and if you've been talking with them, a lot of times you've already built up a rapport with an author, you've built up a rapport with an editor, and you can say, hey, I was wondering if you could take a quick look over this fic, or if I could bounce this idea off of you that's kind of related to what you did. And they're a lot more likely to do that if you've talked with them before, because I mean, you've been following them, you've spent time with them, and you've conversed and commented, and maybe the author didn't comment back, but a lot of authors will know the name, or like my case, I'm terrible with names. On Fanfiction, make sure you have like
A fairly consistent icon.
a consistent avatar image.
If you change your avatar every week, like a lot of us that aren't good with names do lose your identity.
Yeah,
So
and
I'm
you-
like, oh, you
Or,
have
but,
one.
but if you keep it somewhat consistent, like Seeker, the Lurker is
Right.
always Aku themed.
Right.
Of some
Yeah.
variety.
And that makes it easier to interact with the community when you have a more stable profile. Huh? Stable. I've been doing this way too long and I don't even notice that anymore. But yeah, it really,
Just another one of those
yeah,
interesting
I
things
can
about
definitely
Ponyville.
say to that, it's like, generally my rule of thumb for comments is that just because I try to focus on my own writing, if like I get a random pre-read request from someone I haven't seen before, then I don't.
no, I'm just trolling you now.
Yes, and you were about to make me feel guilty, but it's like, if I answered all those, then I would be doing editing and pre-reading, not my own writing. But if you want to pitch ideas at me, I can generally comment on something like a page on PM. Okay, I can glance over that and give you some feedback on stuff like that. But if you're someone I've been going back and forth with a lot, and it's like someone I know, and then it's like, then I'm much more inclined to give the thing a read over. I'm not going to catch grammar. Grammar is bad to this person.
That's why I'm here.
Exactly.
I'm
It's like, I can comment on content really well.
For the record, I am not an author. I have never written a story in my life. I am an editor. I bang words with hammers until all the commas are dead. And yes, this actually came from a comment on one of the stories I was editing with Web Pope and Jake the Ginger. So did this quote, actually, the best, what is it? The most epic candy should be smelted and forged. Also came from another comment we were writing on. That was on Sweet Creeks and Royal Lights. So,
Well, and the thing about being an editor or pre-reader, if you want to, if you're new and you're like, I am having trouble getting my story seen by more people and stuff like that, you can find other authors to edit and pre-read for each other. So that, it's the idea that like, hey, I helped Zephyr edit his first story, so the next story I come out with, I might say, hey Zephyr, so can you give this a look over, and if you like it, would you mind, putting it out there for your followers if you think they'd like it too. And, you go back and forth and you forge friendships, and you can help build each other's audiences, and that's something that, like at first in Fanfiction and EQD, you had, like, it was what everyone was talking about. But you don't see that as much anymore. I mean, it's still nice when someone blogs about a story that they like and they get a couple extra views, but usually what you tend to see now more of in the fan fiction community for My Little Pony is people saying, hey, this person has helped me, he's a really good guy, I mean, he helped me, this arc of the story, or he helped bring this out, or he helped fix my problem with this character, or I have too many commas. And then he did this story that I liked, and I think some of you might like too. It's about this, and a lot of people are more likely to follow something like that than like an EQD post, there's a lot of sites out there now, or fanfiction groups that'll promote stuff, and they still don't get a lot of views. But when you're getting a personal recommendation from an author who you're friends with, who you've worked with, it's a lot easier to expand each other's audience that way.
Yeah, I mean, signal boost, what you're talking about is signal boost, basically, the phrase I think a lot of us like to use for that. It is certainly important, especially for like beginning authors. It's really hard to get a story noticed if you don't have followers, if you don't have it published somewhere and stuff. But, I mean, in my mind, the right way to go about that is you make friends. You offer to pre-read for people. You comment on stories that you like, you offer to edit for them. And eventually, ask them to do a favor in return for like, hey, can you help me edit this and stuff? And it's a natural part of the community and networking and all that and stuff. Don't abuse it. Don't just go beg Pinstroke for a signal boost on your brand new fic that he's never edited and never seen and stuff. I mean, that's rude to just expect people to do you favors for no reason. But get involved. And it's not just that you have to get somebody really popular either. There's a lot of, you can make friends with a lot of authors that don't have any pre-readers and need one. And they maybe only have, 50 or 60 followers, but that's still 50 or 60 more than you might have starting out.
Well, and something about 50 or 60 followers is that when there's an author who's done a number of stuff and people like it, and they don't get a lot more followers for new fics, maybe they just don't get the signal boost they want, they tend to be a little bit more dedicated. When you have a smaller fan base that you put out stuff, you tend to see a lot more people that are like more dedicated to that person. So
Yeah.
small people can give you just as much of a signal boost as large people. I mean, depending on the situation.
I think another part of that too is, and I'll get to that one in just a minute. I think another part of that too is recognition. When you get people that pre-read or edit it for you, or that you've pre-read stuff or edited stuff for, do a good job of documenting that. Just put a little. We don't want much, but put a note down at the bottom of the description of the story, edited by and pre-read by.
It's like I do that for every chapter.
Right.
And that's polite. That's just what you want to do for
It's one of the ways that, like, I've had people that have contacted me to ask me to pre-read stuff just because they've seen my name at the bottom of other stories they read. And I'm like, I'm not an author, how did you find me? They're like, well, I saw you pre-read this one, and be like, okay, sure.
And on the subject of finding pre-readers and editors, it's like, for me, just the last few pre-readers and editors I've kind of worked with, have all been ones that have, like, they did a bit of editing on through comments or PMs just voluntarily. And it's like, hey, you did this was nice. It's like, and it's like, for them, it's like they get to see something before I throw it out to the public.
Right.
And that's in itself is sometimes a cool little
Awesome
bonus.
sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and one of the other things, it's not just about getting editors and pre-readers. We're going to move on towards about that interaction a little bit later. But one other thing is, maybe even if you're a popular author, say you have a whole bunch of people who usually edit pre-read, it's not uncommon for people to want to change it up a little bit to get to get some different views on stuff, to see how you do stuff, change it up. Because I mean, that's how you learn and grow. So you might have one person who's been editing with you for a while, and you've gotten it down to now when they edit your stuff, they're only making a couple of comments because they've worked with you and you've improved as an author. And if you're editing and pre-reading for others, that's a great way to learn as well, because a lot of times people will use Google Docs and you can see multiple people's comments, so you can see comments other people made that you missed. And a lot of times even some of those comments are opinions in that, like the Oxford comma. Some people really like the Oxford comma, some people don't like it. And what the Oxford comma is, if you do something and something, comma, something, comma, and something, that last comma is the Oxford comma. But yes, I love the Oxford comma. I have seen instances where it was inappropriate to use, and that's the thing. Rules in writing are oftentimes guidelines. A lot of the greatest authors will break one or two rules here or there, but they'll do it in a very specific way in a certain circumstance.
And commas are one of the worst ones. The rules on commas are just insane, which is why I'm so picky about them.
And sometimes it's like the sin for me. Sometimes I get going faster than my fingers can go.
Oh yeah.
It's like oh, this is awesome.
And
you look back 10 minutes later and oh my God,
typos.
it's like all the it's are comma are apostrophe, and I know none of them are supposed to be.
And some of that too is that's why it's good to have more than one. If you're doing editing, it's more to have more than good to have more than one editors, because there are times even when I'm pre-reading, I'll miss stuff. And other people will catch it and be like, oh, thanks for catching that. I'm sorry, you had a question that we sort of...
Yeah, it's not a question, it's more of a plug. I want to plug the, have you ever heard of the writers group on Fanfiction.net? It's like probably the biggest group on
There's a
the
number of
site.
writers groups.
Yeah, it's just called the writers group, and there's an IRC there, and there's a lot of really helpful interactive people. Well, sometimes it's not too busy there, but I would recommend everyone go on there and make some new friends, because you can find aspiring authors, people to pre-read for you, you can pre-read for them. It's a really good, small community.
And there's a lot of groups like that on Fanfiction. If you have like a romance fic, you're shipping two ponies together, you can go to the shipping thing and you can, there will be a shipping group and it'll have, 1,000 or 1,500 people on it. Or you might find one that only has 80 people on it, and then they will also have editing and pre-reading there. So if you're having trouble finding editors and pre-readers, you can go to your favorite stories, but if they're really popular stories, that editor or pre-reader might have already had several other requests and their time might just be taken up. So you can go to these groups and you can find people, and if you find someone and they edit your fic and it doesn't, your interaction with each other, they're not catching things that you're not, maybe you both write the same way, or
they're just not having a good time. It's like sometimes people will sign on to be an editor and they won't really just have a good time, and it's just like there's no sense forcing the person to stay, or you yourself forcing to continue through it. It's like it's like, I'm sorry, the story is just not doing it for me.
Well, and a lot of times the editors, pre-readers won't even like, they'll like say like, oh, that story sounds interesting, and they'll read it and they'll be like, you know what, your writing style just isn't mine, and you know what, don't take it personally. If an editor or pre-reader is reading something and they don't like something that you read, you know, look at that as an opportunity to have some discourse. Like, well, why don't you like it? Well, I really didn't like it when you shipped these two ponies together because they got together because this pony, like Fluttershy was the one approaching Rainbow Dash, and like this doesn't make any sense. I mean, you'd think at least have some
like,
build up or something.
I actually had, it's like the one time I threw part of a story up on the Ponyville or whatever boards, one of the 4chan break-off boards, because I had someone telling me to flip-flop Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash because they felt Rainbow Dash is bravado, but this is for Haunting Nightmare. Bravado, but if she's faced with something scary, she will kind of start to show some of that yellow in her tail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can definitely look at, you know, maybe a disagreement as a chance to discuss it, because you might decide. I mean, if you're the author, you have the final say. But it's always good to listen to your editor or pre-reader, because even if you disagree with them, it's good if they know why, because they might learn something too, but also, a lot of editors, pre-readers will just stop editing pre-reading for you if, you know, they don't feel that it's a mutual conversation where it's, hey boss, what about this? No. What about this? No. What about this? Good job. It's like, well, it's very straightforward, and it's not.
And one thing,
Like we've had that conversation.
Shots fired.
And one thing that it's like I don't encourage it, but it ends up happening because Illustrious Q goes through and he just makes jokes. It's like let the editors and kind of have fun. It's like I'm writing something that's involving mod at the moment, and it's like someone asks, well, how did the rocks fall? They fell like rocks. And Illustrious just was laughing his head off at that and he made a comment about it, and I'm sure the other pre-readers will be making comments like if you get multiple pre-readers and editors in the same story at the same time, they'll bounce off their own comments and it'll be more fun for them.
You end up with comments like the most epic candy should be smelted.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is important to have fun. I mean, this is something we're all doing because it's fun. I mean, we're not like here because this is our day job. So if you're not having fun at it, like, don't get offended if people aren't having fun with your story. If they're not right for it, let them go. Vice versa. If you're trying to pre-read for someone because you wanted to, you know, start being interactive, but it's no fun, that's fine. Just be polite about it. We can be friendly. You can dislike something someone else likes and still be friends. I mean,
As long as you're not nasty about it.
right.
Right,
I mean,
yes.
be polite. Be nice. Like, say sorry. You know, just I'm going to work on something else. This isn't my thing. You know, hey, good luck with it and stuff. And
And sometimes you're busy, and you're just like, you know what? This chapter, I won't be able to make the deadline you want.
I have a couple points. One of them says, a Stephen King quote. He says, to write is human, to edit is divine. And also, if you have a good editor, be nice to a good editor, because professional copy editors' time is worth starting $20 an hour. And if you're getting it done for free from someone who's about that good, that is a real treasure.
Or someone, you can have a editor, pre-reader who, you know what, they don't actually fix a lot of stuff, but they make a lot of comments that you build off of, and you might think, well, they're not really helping me. Why am I, including him? I can include someone else and stop wasting his time. And then you realize that, wait, like half the story is basically ideas that he's given me.
Well, and that's kind of a good example too, because how many different ideas have we put into Hole in the Sun?
oh yeah,
It's turned from, originally it was supposed to be, what, 5 or 6 chapters? And
well,
now
originally
you're
it was
like,
a
oh, right,
3,000
now I've
word
got,
story, and now it's 100,000 words.
yeah, 100,000 words, and he's going, I can't keep up, I've got too many, we have a separate document that we're using for comments, just on stuff we've come up with for ideas for later stories.
Yeah.
That's a good 10 pages long
That'll
at
be
this
like
point.
the third sequel if we ever get around to it. But no, it is important to note though, like, there's different types of pre-reading. I mean, you can get assistance on a story in more than one way. It's not just, hey, can you find out where I typoed, where I spelled something wrong and misused a comma? I mean, there's copy editing. There's also pre-reading for, hey, this story was actually interesting versus it was boring versus I was really confused at this part. And then there's actually, some of the brainstorming stuff, especially in longer things. If you have people that are assisting you with that, they might be throwing out ideas. I mean, there's stuff that was comments, 5 chapters ago that ended up being story elements later because that's a really good idea. You're right, we should get that character involved. She would be perfect for that. So, you know, there's all sorts of different levels people can be involved. Some people are great just at the technical editing, let them do it. Some people are gonna forget all those typos just like you did. But they maybe have some good ideas, so, you know, involve a lot of people.
I generally run my own editing and pre-reading in 2 stages where I have a set, it's like I'll let a few people in that I know are gonna be good for the content, and then I'll let in the next
Pre-readers
set.
before editors, a lot of people do it that way.
Yeah. Because if you're letting pre-readers in after editors, and you're making changes that might be riddled with editing errors, and so it's.
You know, we've been talking from the author's perspective. What about from the editor's perspective? If you're commenting on someone's fic and maybe they're not providing, you know, you're not getting that discourse. I mean, like, what are some of the things that you've done?
On the technical side of editing, on the copy editor side, a lot of that is grammatical rules, and so you have to be familiar with those. And a lot of those don't require interactive comments. It's this comma shouldn't be here, or this should be capitalized, or you know, so there's that, and those don't require comments. On the flip side of that, on the editing side, sometimes people will say this, and you'll have to make that comment of, this doesn't sound like that character, which is one of the great things about My Little Pony. We've got such well-developed characters in such a rich world that when I read Applejack or I read Sweetie Belle, I can hear their voices in my head. I know what they sound like. I know what they're supposed to sound like. But you'll get people that write these comments. Like, I've had a bunch of people, Pinkie Pie is insanely difficult to write. And I've had people make a lot of stuff on Pinkie Pie, and they write it and you go, this is too much of just Pinkie being Pinkie, or this doesn't sound like something Pinkie would say. And then there's people like Jake the Ginger, who is one of the best Pinkie Pie writers I've ever seen, wherein he says stuff and it's such a unique blend of this is Pinkie being Pinkie and this is something that actually makes sense, that I'm like, I don't have anything to add, dude. I just go, yep.
Pull that comment. Yeah.
And so there's that aspect of it from the editing side too, and we've run into that one especially on some of the bigger stories I worked on, like Hole in the Sun or 3 Wishes or Unbound Skies, where we've had characters that we've had Rarity say some things that they didn't sound like Rarity, and so you have to go in and you have to say, maybe this would be phrased better this way, and that's more of a perspective comment than a technical editing comment, but it's still just as important.
If it's more than a one-on-one conversation, it's like maybe move this dialogue to Fluttershy.
Yeah, and I think I made a couple of points on that on somewhere in those 3 Wishes where we rearranged a couple of paragraphs. It's like, okay, this paragraph is, I realize it's all one person speaking, but you need to cut that in half and move this paragraph up and this paragraph down below it, so it's more of an interactive conversation. And so there's that aspect of it too, where you have to pay attention to flow of dialogue and the cadence that people, that you know, different characters are using. And a big part of that, and this is going to sound weird, but a big part of that is read stuff out loud, especially if you're editing. Don't just read it on paper. Say it out loud, because sometimes it changes. It'll look fine on paper and it'll be technically good, and then you say it out loud and you go, that character would never ever say that, or say it in that way.
There's also, because like I'm dyslexic and ADHD, so like I'll get distracted by stuff and it'll sound wrong and I won't catch it. There's also software out there, and I don't have any off the top of my head, but there's software that you can plug in your story and it'll read it to you, and you might, you know, it's not going to have the correct intonations, but you can still catch a lot of stuff, and a lot of times the intonation is what matters. So if something's reading it flat to you, you'll hear like, whoa, that has completely different meaning. That doesn't sound like this person's like, you know, having an inside joke or being comforting to the other person. That just sounds like they're being mean. And so then you might have, they put an arm on the other pony and then they say the joke and then they laugh. Or not. So there's different ways that you can go about doing it. And speaking something that I thought of that I forgot before was that you can have editors and pre-readers for specific things. I have a story, because I've been working on this and some other stuff and moving, I haven't been put out a story in a while, but it's basically ready. It needs to do some editing, and I'm okay with leaving it to wait till after the con, because I want to get someone, I want to make it good for my readers. So I have one person who's written the best Gilda and actually best Discord I've ever seen, and I have him specifically for writing Gilda to help me fix Gilda, and he's like, you know what, you need to fix this. I had to rewrite all of Gilda. Other people didn't get that. So if you find someone who's really good at something, you can ask. Like, you can ask Penstroke, well, I'm not going to volunteer him, but like, for example, if you're like, I have this story that's kind of like in past sins, and I want to run this this basic concept for this villain by you, he might say, watch out for this. You might want to focus a little bit more on that kind of stuff, and then you might find someone else who will actually be able to be willing to sit and look through that specific thing for your story.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too in dealing with things like past sins or the winning verse is probably the biggest one of the bunch that I've seen. Where you've got this.
There was a time it seemed like there was always something in the feature box from the winning verse.
Yeah, well, Life and Times is now officially over and closed. They have posted the final chapter, and it was fantastic. There are still some side stories going off on it, but for a long time, Winning Pony was the thing. And it's called the winning verse. Come on. There's a lot of side stories that are all written from. There's what I would call the main story. EQD actually says it's the incredibly apologetical letters of Rainbow Dash is the main story, but at this point it's become Life and Times of a Winning Pony.
Well, EQD is whatever's first.
Right, is whatever's first. So, but that notwithstanding, there's a lot of stories in that setting that are both tied directly into the main storyline and then just other ponies from that same world. And if you're going to write stuff for that, get a hold of the person that wrote the main story that you're writing off of, and make sure it's okay with them before you do it. So there's some.
I actually have 4 blog posts.
Yes.
Because I kind of got tired of typing out the answer. Can I use Nix?
Well, and like Winning Verse, they actually went through and they've made a list of FAQs of how do things work in this universe, in this world that we've created. And so there's some pretty specific things about magic and in that particular case about making ponies. We won't say it any more than that, but and how that can happen and the different aspects involved. And for the record, there's no clop in that story. There's a lot of innuendo, but there's no clop. So bear that in mind. But you want to get permission from the people that wrote that, because you don't want to go and irritate them to the point where they're actually going to badmouth you, or they're never going to want anything to do with you again. So later down the road, if you do want to pre-read your edit for them.
And you also have instances like K-Cat, who did Fallout Equestria, which is probably the most read fic. And there's literally, what was it? There's over 500 side stories now?
Oh, something like that. Yeah, that I take that back. That would be the biggest one for side stories. Yes.
I mean, K-Cat, she doesn't like to he doesn't respond to a lot of messages a lot of times. So I wanted to do an interview with her one time, so I tried to message her, and she didn't get back. I'm like, I don't want to harass her. That's something. If someone doesn't respond, I mean, let it go. I mean, it's one thing if you see on Fanfiction that they haven't been on in 30 weeks and suddenly they're on again and you resend a message. But if someone's not very open to the community, let them be. See if there's something else. Because a lot of times, like with K-Cat, who not only is there multiple groups on Fanfiction, but there's also an entire website dedicated to side stories and the main story for Fallout Equestria. You can find information there because K-Cat will have been in contact with one of the people in the group and will have made an official post about something. And because K-Cat came out and said, you can do whatever you want with my story, it's free, it's open, don't ever charge anyone for anything. Yeah. And that was basically it. And there's more, and there's a lot of people who analyze her work and they can help you even if the author can't. Yes. So if the author is busy.
It's like, it was something was hearing someone talk about what was it for? It was like someone doing show writing or something for the back, not at this convention, for some other thing. Oh, that was from work, that's right, that was with Flint. But I'm working with people, weird people. But it's that sometimes the fans know the work better than the author.
Yes.
It's like...
Well, and I've done that before, where you start writing a fic, and then you go back to one of the previous chapters, like, oh, I forgot I did that. Like, man, I was cool.
And then, well, and that's where sometimes it helps to have really dirty authors. Like right now, I'm actually putting together a timeline for for the Three Wishes stuff.
Because yeah, I forgot what I named some of the characters, and
It's-
it's, the wrong name of my own
yeah.
story at one point. I'm like,
And
they
it's-
showed up for like 5
And we're
chapters.
bouncing back and forth between different points in time on the timeline and stuff, and I'm like, okay, so we have to have a cohesive timeline, and so you can look at this and go, okay, we are here in this timeline, but we're talking about this event here, so that event that we referenced up here hasn't happened yet. So we can't use that.
It can get really confusing when you do the bigger fix, and it certainly helps if you have people that are willing to assist with that more complex sort of plotting. and planning
Especially if
stuff.
you have time travel.
But-
Oh,
yeah, that's a whole other can of worms for sure.
Yes.
The,
There's multiple cans of the same.
But yeah, that's one thing that you guys are getting at though is that we're writing fan fiction. We're already writing stuff based on someone else's work. When people want to write off of your work, you want to write off of someone else's, and especially when they're in the fan community, it's just polite. I mean, it's not legally obligated since we're all in fan fiction, but it's just polite to say, hey, is this okay with you that I'm doing the spinoff? Like you said, some authors like K-Cat have a blanket policy. Yeah, everyone can write spinoffs, you just can't sell them. Cool. Other people will have more
It's
general
like,
policy just as long as
my
it's...
general policy is, go ahead, do it. It's like, it's the internet. I can't really stop
Right.
you. If you
I
really
would
want to
prefer
respect
that
my
you don't write
wishes,
dirty
no.
stories with these nice little characters. like that.
Exactly,
So
it's
please
like-
stay away from that if you can. Yeah, I can't legally stop you, but, you know, but it's just polite to ask. I mean, that's a great thing about community. One of the other things I wanted to get to about community though was, it's not just all editing and pre-reading.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this, part of what is community outreach, especially as an author, is trying to get just good old-fashioned readers. You want people to read your story because, I mean, authors, I mean, that's what we like. I mean, authors love having people read and comment on their stories, whether they're editors or not. And I always, comments, like we mentioned earlier, always feel so much better than just likes and stuff. But if you want people to keep coming back to your story, interact with them. And when people comment on your story, they've taken the time to smash words into a keyboard because of something you did, something that was in your imagination. That's awesome. Let them know that. Thank them for their comments, even when they're negative, even when they're telling you what you did wrong in a story. That's useful too.
So long as they're not being nasty about it.
Even if they're being nasty, thank them and just, I mean, but you know, in a very, you don't have to like say, yes, you're right, no, yeah, I'm a totally horrible person. But you can say, well, I thank you for your opinion, thank you for taking the time to comment, you know, you don't even have to say you disagree, you can just leave it at that. Other people will see that and see that you can take criticism and will be more encouraged to comment when they have something that's a more realistic criticism. The other part of that is that when you comment on things, people realize they're actually interacting with the author. They like this work that you wrote. When they see that they actually have direct contact with you, it encourages people to read you. Most of the times when I see that little notification that says so-and-so is following you and I've got a new follower, it's after I've replied to a batch of comments. I mean, I'll let 1 or 2 or 3 comments build up sometimes or more when it's a new release. But when I go back and reply to those individual people, I'll usually get a couple new followers out because they see that I'm actually paying attention and reading their comments and they know it, and that really goes a long way towards building a
Well,
community.
and sometimes, I'll try to make this quick for you guys. Sometimes you will have a comment to make on someone, they're just like, because like they end like a comment stream or something, like 2 people are having a conversation, you know, within the comments for your story, and they end it. It's okay for you to just go hit the thumbs up, because sometimes they'll go and look back at the comment stream and they're like, oh, some people thumbed up my comment, like that's really cool. I mean, it's not like it gets followers, or it's not like it's a direct comment back to them, but it still, you know.
Well, at least lets them know that you read it.
Well, maybe it's not you, but
Right.
people like it, and people will have comment discussions in a story, sometimes about completely different stories, and you know what? That's pretty much always okay, unless
Yeah.
it's inappropriate or something.
Yeah.
but-
You don't have to, you don't
Unless
have to
it's like people having a troll argument, it's like that's the one time I'll kind of step in. It's like, dude, guys, please, if you must continue this conversation, do it over PM. It's like I'm shutting this down.
Yeah.
Now, we did have one question before we get
Did
to
I?
this.
I'm sorry, did I miss
Actually,
that?
one of the things I typically do is when I'm writing somebody else's, when I'm writing stories based off of somebody else's work, I always put disclaimers at the top of my stories.
Yep.
Top of my stories, because I don't want, because this has happened to me a couple of times. You don't want to steal anybody's original idea.
Right.
You must always give them credit, because it's really their property. It's really their ideas.
So his comment was to make sure that if you are doing something based off of someone else's work, and even if it's not a direct thing, if it's like, you know what, this inspired me, make a comment on it. It's basically the greatest, like, comment that an author can have is that like, oh, we're so inspired by your work, I wrote something of my own, and you know, I'm giving you credit and everything like that, and that's one of the greatest, like, even if it's not direct, it's one of the greatest things you can get. Just to check, can everyone in the back hear us? Okay.
We are not using microphones at all.
I'm probably gonna wait till Sunday when we can't talk.
We had, I'm part of the production staff, and we had some technical issues come up where we didn't have some of the equipment that we needed because the places we needed to go to get it are closed because it's 4th of July. So. Yeah, we're scrambling.
So you were saying something?
Oh, I was just going to mention too that, like Zephyr said, it's not when you're communicating with people and you want to be part of the community. A lot of the times you have conversations that aren't even related to what you started at. The first time I talked to him,
making friends.
Yeah, it was a PM on his story on.
No, I actually made 3 comments on another story that was not belonging to either of us. Like.
Oh, was that it?
Yeah,
yeah.
I commented and then you replied back and we were discussing some other story.
We just got to talking, and now I mean we're pretty good friends, and you know we go and we hang out, and we go to the gun range, and we go out and we grab a beer sometimes, and that's just how it is. So a lot of it isn't just fan fiction stuff. Don't be afraid to interact with people. Get out there and talk to them, and don't be afraid to
meetups.
Go to meetups and that kind of thing.
Convention!
Or conventions.
Yeah, go to a convention. We really suggest that if you haven't been to one, you should go to a convention.
and actually...
And buy the really expensive badges so we have a bigger budget for next year.
Okay.
No, and actually on top of that, one thing that you see a lot in a lot of conventions is writing not being taken as seriously as other forms of media. There's a lot of view of writing that, well, since everyone learns to write in school, everyone knows how to write. And you know what?
No, they don't.
Technically,
Trust me, I've seen a lot of it.
Technically, they're supposed to. Technically, they're supposed to. But
they don't have vision.
Well, and some people, I mean, they don't write, but they can sit down and they can just good story, and you're like I asked you to step up and prove it, and you know what? That probably, you actually did really good. You should be a writer. And they're like, well, anyone can write. And the thing is that writing well and writing to audiences that people like and improving your craft is more than just putting words on a page. It is reaching out to the community. And one of the things that we wanted to do here at Everfree Northwest, and this is a shameless plug, is we actually have some workshops. And I was going to do this later, but I think this is actually a good time to mention that. We have a workshop each day called the Open Reading and Critique Workshop. So, ORC, Open Reading and Critique. And you can bring even an electronic copy, about 650 words of the story, right, Seth?
You want to just explain that? Basically,
I put him in charge of it, so.
Basically what we're doing is these quick little workshops. Bring the intro to a story. It's like 600, 700 words. You get about 5 minutes to read it at a table. Everyone critiques it for 60 seconds. You just go in a circle, and it's a great, quick-fire way to get feedback and just see what other people are sort of liking what they say. The good part about that is that you meet these people you're sitting at the table with, you hear some of the stuff they just wrote, and afterwards, you might have made new friends, and you can talk about it more. If you want to talk in more depth about it after the work and stuff, it's a great way to both meet fellow authors that are serious about trying to get better and stuff.
Well, and talking with people in person is also good, because sometimes people leave a comment, and it'll come out oh, he really didn't like it, and I'm sure that's happened to you a couple of times, where people wanted to change the whole thing. I mean, it's common for actual writers who are approaching publishers. The publisher will say this needs to be tweaked, this needs to be tweaked, and then the author will begrudgingly rewrite entire paragraphs or chapters or even entire stories and send it back. It's no, your story was good. It just needed these small little tweaks. It didn't need to be rewritten or anything like that. So.
That said, go watch Art of the Dress, and we'll call it
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, Suited for Success, and we'll just call that good. Lesson over.
So it's really good to meet people in person and talk with them, because you also might find out that you match up with someone and you make great pals, and you can follow up and exchange numbers and emails and Fanfiction accounts, and you never know, you two might be the great duo that come out of Fanfiction or something.
And if I could plug, for those of us who are local in the Seattle area, we do have a great Seattle Bronies meetup group.
Yes.
That has lots of good.
It's basically how the con got started.
And that's it's on meetup.com.
Yes,
meetup.com. Okay, good.
We have regular meetups for various. We go out to dinner. We watch new episodes, all that kind of good stuff.
Well, if you want to do something like that with other writers, we also have the Chill Outs Friday and Saturday night, which last year a lot of people just casually came for. I mean, Zephyr casually stopped by on the way to the to Pony Stock, and you never made it, did you?
I don't know if I ever made it. All I know is that like I'm on writing staff because I accidentally like stumbled into the room last year at Everfree. So now I'm running workshops.
It's a great place to just
Community works.
Well, and you don't have to talk about writing either. I mean, they're talking about going out and getting beer, and if you're 21 or older,
If
then
you're of legal age.
you can find people to do that kind of stuff with, or you can talk about anime. I mean, it's when you meet other people who are of a similar mind, you don't even have to do it. You might find someone, and you might be great together, and you know what? You might not, flush with an editor, pre-reader on a story or something like that. You might bounce some ideas off, but you might find out that you two are both just the biggest fans of Godzilla. And gosh darn it,
It's time for the next epic Godzilla.
Some of the ideas that you write about though are kind of like overused. Like there's certain ideas like crossovers. Those are done a lot.
Some of them, yes.
So yeah, so it's like
Is
that's
there,
what
Is there a way to like still make it interesting and like?
it's like. Be somewhat aware of what's going on regarding. It's like be somewhat aware of what's going on with that particular, like for example, crossover you want to do, and try to find a way to make it different. It's like that's the thing.
Target audience.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
keyword is target audience. I mean, Totally Not a Brony is a friend of a lot of ours, and he has like 1,700 followers. He actually did a story that only had 67 views in the first month, and he had 1,700 followers. And it's not that it was a bad story. Everyone who read it liked it, but it was an idea that was out there that didn't appeal to a lot of people. So when you're doing something like a crossover, you can understand that maybe your story will appeal to new authors, or maybe it'll appeal to authors who've read a crossover more. It goes more in depth. It explores a specific idea that hasn't been seen as much in Fallout Equestria. Every single story that's popular within the Fallout Equestria fanfiction subcommunity.
Yeah.
And that ties back to
Has
the
its
community
own
thing.
thing.
Knowing where your audience is if you write a Harry Potter crossover, you need to find those other Pony fans that are also Harry Potter fans. And sure, everyone else might be thinking, okay, it's still just Harry Potter, so to them it's the same as everything else. But your slightly unique take on Hermione's personality in this one might be that thing that's different enough for them that are really dedicated to that type of crossover. So
On that note, that
know
story
where
is
your
called
audience-
Hocus Pocus by PRB.
And there's 5 other ones too, but yes.
But to kind of continue on that.
I think he had a clarification.
Because I hit a dead end somewhat. Like I keep on having this like equilibrium between like one like versus one dislike. And this my story right now that I'm writing, it has like 32 likes and then 31 dislikes, and it's got like so many views, but people are still disliking it.
Ask for comments. Like at the end of your chapters, like put a note saying, hey, I totally understand if you don't like this, but do me a favor, let me know why. If you're gonna dislike it, let me know why. I'm curious, I'm seeing this. Just be polite and upfront about it. Hopefully people will tell you why, and you'll maybe be able to learn from it.
And if you're seeing that a lot, do that at the end of the first chapter.
I do it at the
Go
end of
back
every
to
chapter.
the first
personally.
chapter. If you're seeing something that's a theme, especially a lot of people making comments, maybe they only read the first chapter. And hey, look, someone, because they'll just be on Fanfiction. Oh, it's a recent story. This sounds interesting. They click on it. Oh, I didn't like it because of this reason, and then they'll just move on. They won't see the later posts that you make or blogs or stuff like that. So you want to post in the story. You do see a lot of first-time authors saying in the story description, hey, this is my first story. Please leave comments. And you know what? You'll see a lot of those authors get a lot less views, but a lot more comments. Because there's a lot of people who will say, you know what? I haven't seen an author. I haven't read a story from a new author in a while. And then, they'll go and they'll actually, say, hey, it's a new story from a new author, or it's something that they're trying a new style. Sure, I'll read it and I'll give some feedback. And there are people who will actually go around and do that. It can be hard to get them. I mean, the best way to do that is to do a group post or a post in a group about like, hey, I have this story. It's got some likes and dislikes. Can someone take a look at it and maybe help me figure out what path to go down, or like where the issue is, or because it might be they don't like the crossover matchup. It might be they don't like one of the characters. It might be that you need to get another or a better editor or pre-reader just to go over things.
Right.
I
Well,
mean,
and it could be too that it's just something that you haven't really tried before. Like, I don't know if we have any shipping fans in here, but Sweet Treats and Royal Delights, the comment that the story that this particular comment on my shirt came from, it's a Twibon ship, and almost nobody had ever done that. And so when Jake started writing it, he's like, hey, do you want to pre-read this? And I said, sure, I'll give it a shot. And he said, I'm not really sure how this is going to work, or if we can make it into a decent story at all, but We went, and it's, I think 6 chapters in now, and so far I like it.
And that's the other thing, if you have an idea and you don't think you can do it, you can ask another author, like, hey, so I've seen you do this. I mean, I did this with actually a Snapple fix, so snails and apple bloom. And literally, there was no other story on the site. But I went to,
That's a new one.
Anyway, you'd think it'd be a terrible ship, but I had this weird idea, and I'm like, I can't write this type of shipping because a lot of it is from the perspective of snails being like really smart, but kind of like offbeat, so like he doesn't like confrontation, but he thinks in his head and he notices a lot of things. So he's actually like kind of smart, he's just slow at being smart. So I went and I got help, I can't remember that author's name, but I was really happy with how he wrote it. And I worked with him, and I edited and pre-read for him, and helped guide the story and some of the ideas he came up with. I'm like, you know what? I know I actually commissioned it from him because he's busy, but I liked the ideas that he was coming up with, and so the story changed, and so it ended up being this really adorable fic about this really like nerdy nice guy and this girl, and you know, who doesn't like nerdy nice guys and cute girls in this room?
Well,
I mean,
that's like, I think another good example of that would be like Rainbow Pie.
mhm.
I mean, how nobody would think that those two characters would go together, and yet,
One of
Life
my
and
favorite
Times of
ships
Woody's
is
Pony, that's one of the
Rainbow.
things.
Somebody's thought they go together.
Yes.
But
Good point.
There's nothing new under the sun, or, yeah.
Yeah, so there's different ways to approach it, and if you're in a situation where you think it's not going to work, bounce ideas off of someone. I mean, it could be a friend, it could be someone you follow who follows you. I mean, if someone leaves comments and on your fix every once in a while, and you like their comments, you go to them, hey, I had this idea, and I wanted to bounce this idea off of you because I like the comments you make.
Right.
Going back to something you said just a minute ago, Michael, you were talking about that there are people that go around and try and look for new stories and comment on new authors. And something I really would like to encourage everyone to do, be that pony. Go in there, because an author with,
Passing
you know,
around.
10,000 viewers and hundreds of comments on every chapter,
They've got
they're
lots of
getting a lot of
readers.
feedback. The people that don't, new authors and stuff, need a lot more encouragement. Find those less popular fics. Find those ones where, because there is a lot of hidden gems out there. There's so many writers. Fanfiction is growing so fast. There's always new authors coming in that can be amazingly good. I've seen so many of them started just in less than a year and have written some amazing stuff. But they only get there because people said, hey, here's an unknown story with only 3 views on it. I'm going to click it anyway and try and give it a read, and I'm going to comment on it. Especially when you see that. Be that pony, but make those comments, help people out.
I
Because
think-
you know how much it matters to you as an author? Help that, do that for other authors, especially if you start getting a little progress. If you start getting some followers and stuff, still be in there.
I think another part of that aspect of that too is be comfortable with what you do. Even if you don't think it's very good, be comfortable with it. Like, in
it's
my
like
particular...
if you're not someone who's very comfortable with like heavy gore and that stuff,
Right, yeah.
don't force yourself to write that kind of story.
Right. Well, and even that, I put it, it's right up there on my bio on Fanfiction. I've got maybe 12 people that follow me. They're all people I work for. But I put it right up there in front. It's like, look, I'm not an author. I'm an editor. I don't write my own stuff. And so I've got no stories to my name. I'm not an author. I don't write. I don't feel comfortable putting myself in that position where I can write. I just don't think I'm that good on a creative aspect of it. But I'm a very good editor, and that I know I can do. And so I'm more than happy to help, but I'm comfortable telling people, hey, I'm not comfortable doing this other thing. And I get a lot of them, like Web of Hope and Jake the Ginger both, tell me you should write stuff. And I'm like, I don't feel comfortable as a writer, and so I don't.
Well, and there's one guy on Fanfiction who has like 600 followers, and all he does is he comments on other people's stories, and he might like help edit. Do you know
Are you
that?
talking Skeeter?
Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, and
He comments on everything.
and every once in a while he says, "Oh, I'm thinking of writing a story," and then everyone will comment on the things and be like, "Nah."
Yeah.
Super Trampoline in the back, you had a comment real fast.
Oh, I was gonna say, one great way I started doing to get back to the community is I posted a blog post. I'm getting up there in followers. I have 158 now. I said, hey, send me one of your stories of 5,000 words or less, and I will review it. And I got a lot of responses back there because we have all these beginning authors who are desperate for, they want to know how they're doing. And so I started reviewing these stories. Some of them are awful, some of them are pretty good. And that's one of the great things about Fanfiction. There's so many ways to interact with each other.
Yeah. We should probably asked this one before we get too much farther. Did anybody have any particular questions they wanted to ask?
Well, one comment I've been
We've only got like
trying
10
to-
minutes left, so.
Like one comment I've been trying to sneak in, but you guys have been bouncing
for it.
off each other like the wall. Is when it comes to like writing, it's like writing for target audience. Like this is going backwards. It's like when you start to get out there in followers, then a target audience is your followers. It's the people who like what you're doing, and it's like people ask me all the time, well, more Nicks, and all that stuff. And it's like I don't force myself to do that unless I have an idea. But if I have an idea for it, it's like why not do that for the people who have kind of put me where I am in that regard.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought this was only an hour panel, so my bad.
We will take questions though, don't worry.
And you know, if we run out of stuff, we're not going to force it.
Yeah.
We're just going to end it a little early.
Quick question. So from a editor / proofreader's point of view, I was curious to see if you could talk about the etiquette of leaving proofing comments on stories versus unasked for versus doing it when people want you to do it. Because
You're talking about like in the comments?
Yes.
Um,
I've come across that a couple.
A good general rule of thumb, and this applies to pretty much all of life, but anything critical, it's especially relevant for. Praise in public. So if you've got nice stuff to say, put it in the comments where everybody can see it. I really enjoy your stories. They're great for this, and this, and this. But anything that comes after but, anything that comes before the word but in a sentence doesn't count. So always remember that one. So if your comment is, I really like your story, da-da-da-da-da, but, end your sentence at the, I really like your story because of da-da-da-da-da, and put a period. And then send them a PM and say, but, this, and this needed to be fixed.
Yeah, it's like that's how I definitely like to see it. It's like because then it's like I'll go in and fix typos as soon as I'm alerted to them.
Right.
But then
I
there's like
actually prefer the but. I actually prefer it, and the reason why is because to me, they're like, look, I like this, but this is what I had issue with. It's direct and to the point.
And again, I'm not saying do that. I'm not saying don't give that second half of the feedback. I'm saying praise in public, so do it where everybody can see. Criticize in private. Because you don't want to degrade these people and make them, because if you degrade them in public, what happens is there's this perception where they take it too personally, they internalize it, and everybody sees it, and other people will point it out, and then it's this downward spiral, and it's a bad thing.
Well, and you can't turn that around, though.
You can turn that around.
And a lot of times, as an author, you need to say, you know what, it's a criticism, it's hard, but there's no growth without pain in writing. And so you'll sit down and say, maybe it's how they portray the character, and maybe you sit down and you explain, I did this because of this reason, and this thing coming up, and they're like, and you don't spoil or anything, but a lot of times they'll say, you know what, I didn't think about it that way, or they'll be like, I get that, but if you had done it like this and this, and like, you know what, I hadn't thought about that, and suddenly it's a productive,
and so that leads to the second half of my comment is that if you're going to do it, praise in public, criticize in private. When you criticize, don't be mean.
Yes.
Be critical, but you don't have to call them, you're a horrible person, and yada, yada, yada. Just, I noticed there was an issue with this, and it's an issue because of, and list a set of reasons as to why, and if you can, if at all possible, go, this is a problem, and this might be a possible solution for you. I'm not saying this is the only solution, but this is at least one suggestion.
Yeah.
So never ever criticize someone unless you can give them at least some sort of a pointer in the right direction.
I would say I sort of differ a little on that. That is certainly the safe way to do it, keep all the negative into a private message. I think you gotta, if you sort of know the author, how they interact, if you've been following them for a while, you see how they handle criticism and stuff, sometimes it's safer to say, especially if it's something relatively minor, like, I thought it felt a little slow in a few places, but I really like the outcome in this, and if you phrase it in a way that still is gonna be overall positive, having the but in the public, I think is actually good, because first of all, it shows that you were actually critically thinking about the story, not just blindly saying, good job, I want you to just, I'm not just saying, I like this and that's it. You're giving reasons, and it shows that you actually thought about the story, which I as an author appreciate it when people show in-depth insight into whatever I've written, positive and negative. I also think that having it in public, in some ways, makes it, it lends to a community discussion, because some people might say, but I didn't like the way you did this character. Someone else might actually come in before you even get to it, and saying, no, I really like that. I think that's a very realistic view of this character for these reasons. and it inspires more discussion as long as everyone is friendly and polite and not getting hurt over it. If you're
It's
hurting
like-
someone, you're doing it wrong.
It's the old, it's like, I can actually agree with that a bit more, it's like having that kind of negative in there is good, but if your negative is like, I like this, but you have typo, just throw the typos into a
Yeah,
PM.
typos and little technical things are just obviously like clear. Oh, hey, I wrote up a quick list for you of the 15 like grammatical mistakes you made. Yeah, throw that in a PM.
37
Because then it's like, even after they fix it, then there's suddenly this monument in the comments of, oh, these errors were here.
Right.
I've had a couple authors delete, like I fixed the typos, that comment doesn't need to exist anymore, and that's
They're
fine.
right, they're broad.
But sometimes there's other content in the comment, and it's like,
Right.
eh.
And the flip side of that coin is, especially in fanfiction, because this unexpected pony thing has now just taken the whole world by storm. And so you get people that write stories, like one of the guys I started pre-reading for, I think the first one actually that I ever did any kind of editing for, the story Never Judge a Book by Its Cover. When I read it, there were things that were tripping up red flags in my mind, saying English is not his first language. And so when I told him, I said, there are some issues in your story, and I'd like to help you with them. I sent him a PM. And I said, I get the impression from reading this that English is not your first language. And it turns out I was right. He's from Quebec. His primary language is French-Canadian. And so in the process of helping him edit, not only did I get to help him edit his story and make his story better, and a lot of those comments never even saw the light of day. He used them in his own stuff, and he got better as a result. But he never reposted the story or went back and edited it. But on the flip side of that coin, not only did I get to help him improve his writing, but I also got to help him learn English, because I had to go through, as we were going through, I was trying to teach him, these are the rules for English grammar about capitalization and punctuation and, those kinds of things. And so there's that aspect of it as well.
Well, and one thing that everyone should be aware of is, depending where you come from, grammar and spelling changes. I often use the British spellings because I'm dyslexic, so I learned some of them the British way. And
Like
so
color.
people will tell me it's wrong, and then other people will tell me it's right. And it's, as long as it's consistent, consistency is one of the biggest things. And so if you get a new editor partway through with it, and you start, like, oh, this is improving a lot, you might want to have them go through and do, the first couple chapters as well, or the first bit, just so that it'll be consistent, because not only are you improving it, but then sometimes the tone will change a little bit, and so you can keep that from happening if you go back and have to be consistent.
I think we had a question here too.
Yeah. We'll get you next. Oh, I guess we had 3. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, there was.
We'll go that way.
Okay, I have a rather gargantuan-sized fic that is not on FIM.
Okay.
And I understand it's all on Google Docs. And I understand that when you upload something from Google Docs, there are formatting issues. Is there a way of making that more or less?
I think I'm going to throw this to, unless you guys have got it.
Well, there's a number of different answers for that. I think we'll look to someone from the community answer.
There are some very, very specific things that don't code properly, and if you know what those are, you can weed them out really easily.
Is there an FAQ?
And actually, if you want to get together with me at the meetup later, at the writer social thing, I'll explain all of the errors they have.
Okay, because I tried doing it with one short story.
That's my primary medium.
It's more difficult with longer stories that
Yeah.
tends to overwhelm some of the page.
And Google Docs, by the way, is a great way to do stories, because you can get group comments and group editing going on, and it's fantastic.
And the big thing is, when you copy it in, there's an uploader on Fanfiction where you say upload from Google Docs, and you share the Google Doc links. Make sure the Google Doc allows at least viewing, if not editing, to anyone with the link.
Yes.
And then 95% of the stuff will be formatted correctly.
Yes. The other thing is cut it into smaller chunks. Helps a lot too.
A
So
lot of times it's actually spacing issues. For some reason, like, there will be like, I double space this. Well, it only looks like there's one space, and I single space this. For some reason, it looks like it's double, and I don't necessarily know what that is. Usually that has to do with how you format the Google Docs. But it's something to learn, and honestly, it'll be consistent throughout the document.
yeah, the other thing I was going to say that helps a lot is story length. So if you've got, like you say, a huge gargantuan story, do you have it split into multiple chapters?
Yeah, that's 68 chapters.
But is each chapter a separate document?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
so
easier.
keep your chapters as separate documents. That'll help a ton.
Okay.
And that way, when you give people, permission to edit or pre-read or whatnot, they can go through just that one chapter and comment on just that one chapter. And then you can upload just that one chapter to Fanfiction, which helps a lot, first of all. And then the second part is, again, learn the very specific things that translate well across Fanfiction.
And it's like something I've started doing just because, like, back when I was trying to use the Google Doc upload it was leaving large chunks out.
Yeah.
It's like something I started doing is I was very limited about the special formattings I did. It's like I'd center one specific thing and I could control it and find it, and then it's like I'd skim the chapter again, it's like find the italics, but otherwise I'm just writing it and playing.
And this is another thing that I've noticed just in my editing and pre-reading is that a lot of authors that I work with, when they're writing the story, will actually in the story, rather than use the Google Docs italics or bold or whatnot, we'll just input the BB code directly into the raw story in Google Docs, and they don't use the import feature, they actually just copy and paste it.
Oh, I use
and so there's,
it works.
right, and there's guys that I work for that do, but no, it actually solves some of that import issue
If
sometimes.
you're not using like
always.
the bold button, if you actually write bracket D, close bracket around it.
Right, if you actually input the BB code, because if you pull a story from Fanfiction and you look at it, it's gonna have a BB code where a bold is square bracket B, close square bracket, and then the word or whatever, and then square bracket / B square bracket. And so if we don't even use the bold or the italics in the Google Docs, we just input the BB code directly.
Find me, Pico, or, I'm sorry, Jake.
Alt-tab.
Alt-tab.
Jake.
At one of the Fanfiction chill-outs, we can talk technical stuff and shop all night and chat if we need to. There's a lot of technical stuff, and that's sort of getting off topic from
Right,
stuff. but-
we had a couple, we
Yeah,
have questions over here now,
Yeah.
you, I think, so.
Are you done? Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I know this question is kind of probably been asked before, but there's just certain genres and used and abused many times, I'm sure. Do you have any tips on how to write human equestria or Ponyville?
I'm staying out of that one.
I will be bold. Wonder D has a great series of posts, just not like they're connected. He just happens to comment a couple of times about. His rule is that humans in Equestria have never been justified, and you should never do it. He did say that one time he got close to where it'd be justified. Now, here's the thing about human in Equestria: it's your target audience. There's some people who really like human in Equestria, especially people who tend to be a little bit newer to the fandom or come from a little bit more restrictive upbringings. Tend to be a little bit more willing to read that type of stuff. So look at how other people do stuff and think about it. The other thing is, if you really want to write a good human in Equestria fic, why are they human? Like, if it's, well, this person, died and then was sent to Equestria, it's like, that's...
Suspension of disbelief only goes so far.
It's like, it's like that, it's like part of the, it's like, if you really want to do something that's human in Equestria in particular, crossover is usually a fertile ground for that, because crossover is, you're going to get the fans of Doctor Who, for example, or Harry Potter, where it's like, the fact that these worlds are crossing can be explained from both ends of it's a magic mirror to a high school, or...
I would say there's one
But
thing.
even the magic mirror to the high school converted you from human to pony. When you made
and there
that
are
bit.
restrictions, and one thing you can do now actually is just say, this is in that world, not this world, that world, because generally the fandom says, hey, this thing is separate from our thing.
Yes.
And you know what, if there will be a lot of people who will be okay with that, to be perfectly honest, and a lot of people will comment down and they'll say, I can't believe you do this. Like, look, you just respond to them, or you can ignore them and just, you can ignore them or respond to them and just say, look, I wanted to write a human in Equestria fic, and I know a lot of people wouldn't like it, and I'm sorry that you don't, but I mean, I was very upfront that this is what this is, and if you don't like it, there's a lot of other great stories on the site to read. And honestly, if you just don't overreact one way or another, either pro or against anything, a lot of people will like simmer down. They'll be like, I'm angry because of this, and the person's like, hey, that's fine, I get it, it's okay. And then
I honestly think
they don't have any place to put their anger.
there's
Way.
what I actually sort of like a lot of those fics. I'm in the minority, I know, because they're not taken seriously. I think the reason for that though is, like you said, first of all, you have to have a premise for it. If you're doing a crossover with Harry Potter, great, they both have magic. Somebody opened some magic spell. I mean, there's explanations for it. One of the reasons I think they get a lot of a negative rap is because so many of them tend to be focused on Mary Sue characters. They tend to be authorial, self-insert, and that's where a lot of the negative connotation comes. If you have a reason why it's a fantasy world with talking horses, of course anything can happen. Why not? there's no reason that shouldn't be there, but when it's just an excuse to, oh, hey, I get to go in there and meet all the main, this guy named Arthur, is not mine, whatever it is. If you don't make it a Mary Sue, if you make something interesting happen with it, and that's the key to any story. You can take the most ridiculous premise in the world, and if you actually do good with it, it doesn't matter how ridiculous the premise was. So make it a unique story, make it your own. Don't be as Mary Sue about it, and just know that some people are going to hate it anyway because they just don't like that genre. The same way some people hate certain ships.
Yeah. Quick side note on that one too is the tagging feature on Fanfiction is great. So use it. It helps get to that target audience thing. So if it's a human story, tag it human, because people like me or other people that don't particularly care for human, I'm very unlikely to read anything that's got a human tag in it. Just as a note personally. But some people are looking for that, and so it's great. And so it can help weed people out ahead of time.
Science fiction, human HIE stories are my favorite.
Right.
So yeah.
So a couple other questions over here.
Let's go with this one right here. He's been waiting a while.
Yeah.
You.
Me?
Yes, Kevin.
Oh, okay. In regards to human and equestrian, are there any particular ones that you would recommend that are like really unique and all Mary Sue and whatnot?
I don't read them. I really like Stargate Equestria, which is really old and never got finished, so know that going into it. I love Stargate, and because it was existing characters, and they already had a magic portal device in the sci-fi show, so to me it was an interesting, fun romp. It's not highbrow fiction, I would say, but it was a fun romp, and I think it was true to the characters in both universes. So,
romance, you also see a lot of Mary Sue-ish type situations where one character is perfect and
See?
There'll be a panel on that later on romance. We have a lot of questions, so let's just try and get through a little quicker.
he's been waiting for a long time.
There's like 10 over there, just one of you.
Poor guy. So this is kind of veering off subject for a bit, sorry about that, but in the writing process, like, I come up with like the big events, like, oh, that's a good idea, oh, and then that'll happen, oh, and then that'll happen, but then like how to connect, like, from plot point to plot point, the filling of the sandwich, like, I have a difficult time making it all flow, like, where it makes sense.
There's a lot of different techniques for that.
And that's kind of a vague question.
And from the community perspective, that's when, if you have trouble with that, that's when you get pre-readers to help with that. You say, look, I got these ideas, here's my outline, here's the big chunk, how can we connect these? Help me brainstorm.
In that situation, there's two ways I look at it. There's event-driven writing, which is the big events, and then there's character-driven writing, where the characters will take you on the adventure as you write them. When you have big events, you can have your big events, have them planned out, but start writing it in order oftentimes, and start seeing where your characters take you with a goal in mind, but you might find that it shifts to the left, to the right, up, down. You might replace them, you might take something out and put in something different. Especially if you have a lot of ideas, that'll end up actually flowing a lot better.
And then and on the flip side of that coin, you'll end up with stuff that just gets put in your story for no reason whatsoever other than this pointless one-liner joke thing that now ends up being part of the story. Like, what was the thing about Princess Celestia has the Griffin love child thing? That was tabloid headline. Like 7 real headlines and one tabloid headline. And all of us that were editing were like, that has to happen now.
You make one bad joke, and it was like, you have to actually do that now.
Okay, let's just go straight around the room.
Okay, so this one is grammatically focused. When I write, I have this terrible habit, and so do a lot of people that I've read, of using commas to create essentially meter.
Okay.
And I know that's wrong.
It is and it isn't.
What is, like...
Again, this is one of the most nebulous parts of grammar.
But if you're like looking for meter, like for Zakora or something, maybe. But it's like sometimes it's about looking at the words and building the sentence and figuring out where the stress is.
Right, and again, this goes back to my comment earlier of read it. If you're ever unsure, the first thing that you should do is read it out loud. So go back, if you have to, go back a whole paragraph or two, and just read that whole passage all the way through out loud, especially in dialogue. Because you'll catch it more in dialogue than you will in anything else. It helps set meter because a pause indicates, it's supposed to indicate a comma, or comma is supposed to indicate a pause, rather.
Right.
And so there's that aspect of it where it's like, yeah, okay, I need to pause here. And then there's other parts where it sets off a dependent part of a sentence. And this goes, again, we're going into way technical stuff.
Using it as a pause is not.
It's okay.
It can be okay. I would say the best way to do it is oftentimes to before or after or once in the middle of a speaking paragraph, but only once, interrupt the speech to have an action. So, pat go side as you put an arm on Pinstroke's shoulder and say,
keep
your
doing
hair
that.
is awesome.
But yeah, that's one thing, if you need to try to break up the cadence of the dialogue, is to insert a bit of the action
Yeah,
in there.
and that makes the comma seem more appropriate because it's bringing back up the emotions and the actions and the feelings of whoever's talking. Okay. You.
Actually, human crossover or something. That's pretty much the type of stories that I write. I do have one other story that it's basically a sequel to the other person's story. But anyway, the story that I first started writing when I got into the website, at first I wasn't really good at writing that well, but I did have good ideas. And people told me that, hey, this has promise in it, but you have some grammatical errors here, some punctuation errors there, and the story that I'm talking about that had like 32 likes, 31 dislikes. All right, I've been improving upon it for every comment that they give me that improves upon my work. But the problem is that I've still got plenty of people that hate it, and yet my story is like all about action. I read this one story that's by this guy who has like 15,000 views on the one story and has like 8,000 likes. And it's about a guy who goes to their world and ends up marrying like 4 different ponies.
Oh yeah.
Somehow.
Is that one by Brony Ryder?
No, it's called A Hook in 2 Worlds.
Well, here's the thing. It's target audience. If you are in high school and you write a high school level story and high school level people read it, they will like it and they will upload it. If you write a college level story for high school level people, they will like it a little bit less. If you write a high school level story for a college level readership, they will really dislike it.
And if you write a philosophical dissertation for people that just want to ship fic, you're probably going to get a lot of downloads.
Now, some people will like it. Like, I really like some of the stuff. One of my favorite stories is Pinkie Pie watches paint dry. It's like, what, 3,000 words about her staring at a wall and remember that's just like, yeah, the cake's told me about this, here's the cupcake, oh, she feels better now, and then she still had this like huge psychological analysis of like, well, I'm painting the pink, or the orange pink, am I betraying the orange, am I not its friend? And you know what, if you're the right audience and that's one of the things about being an author is staying consistent or informing your audience what you're doing. If you're doing something different, inform them, but yeah.
I was just going to say, sometimes, if you keep rewriting the same story and it's not leading to results, writing is hard. At some point, you have to write more. Write new stuff. Just keep writing. If you keep writing, you will get better. It is guaranteed that if you keep writing, you will get better no matter what. And at some point, maybe you let it go for a year and then come back and rewrite that story after you've had practice on 20 other stories since then. If that's like an idea.
It's like the metaphor that artists like to use. You got to get 1,000 bad drawings.
You got to get 1,000,000 words out before you're a good author. And
Yeah.
That's basically what it is.
The other thing is, if your downvote probably won't go away. People probably won't go back and upvote it. The only way to really do that is if you see a comment where someone's unhappy with their fic and you thank them for your feedback and you incorporate it, sometimes you will get people going back and changing that thumbs down to a thumbs up. That's about all you can do.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that too is when you get those comments that say, I didn't like your story, and that's all they say, take a little bit of a risk and PM them and go, or reply to them in the comments, either one, and just go, why? I need specifics. I'm trying to improve. I'm glad that you read the story, and I understand that you didn't like it, but help me improve. Tell me why you didn't like it, because I can't fix it until you tell me. So there's that aspect of it too.
Would you,
Go ahead.
You guys like do after hours just read stories and then like help people
That's what the orc's for.
Yeah,
The-
that
We
has,
have for
the
people
org is gonna
stuff,
be a
we're gonna be
place to
running
I
here.
can't get to that.
There's
Okay.
3, there's 1 each day.
yeah, and Fanfiction Chill Out is going at the same time as Pony Stock, so you might have to miss out a little bit on Pony Stock, but
Come say hi, meet writers, meet people. I know
Some of the writers are going to be gone tonight because we will have many stories to judge.
there is the Iron Author.
You know what, come talk to one of us afterwards, we'll find something for you to help you. We're going around the room, we do have one back there.
Thanks. This panel's about community view. We're learning about ways to get help from the community and also get back to the community. Is that helpful? My question is about credit. There's a whole lot of ways to help, from like a quick comment or DM, all the way up to like co-writing, right? And there's a lot of ways to credit someone, from hanging in the comments to putting your name in the description or afterwards, all the way to, you know, Danny Boone is on the cover of that past sentence book. Sometimes looking just for some rules of thumb. What's the right way to credit someone to not be a jerk? Like, what's the threshold?
It's like it all depends on your personal styles. Like for me, when I have pre-readers, I credit them under the byline for every chapter. But it's what you get used to, the style of crediting that you get used to, and also kind of be open to discussing. I think, hey, I want to credit you. What's like if you've been credited before? How about the author's done it? Or what do you like? Or do you want to be anonymous or something?
I actually do have a few rules of thumb. If someone's with you the entire fic or plans on being, do it in the story description. And quite often at the end of the story, doing it at the end of each chapter is okay, but you don't have to. If they're helping out with a specific chapter, do it at the bottom. At the end of the story, credit everyone. If someone comes on partway through a story and then helps you with the previous things, comment at the beginning of your story again in the story description, and then at your next chapter, let people know, hey, this person came and helped me out with stuff. If some stuff has been bothering you and you want to read it, you know, this person helped me. And those are pretty good guidelines, I believe.
yeah, the biggest one that I've always seen is just a lot of people will just credit us in the story description. It'll, you know, they'll have the blurb about the description, and there's just this little line at the bottom that says, you know, pre-reading and editing by, and there's a list of names.
And usually link to their user pages.
Yeah.
I mean, make the names links because then people can find, you know, if they write stories themselves, that's helpful. And just be nice. I mean, you can't really go overboard. I mean, there's an author notes section. If you want to be really flowery and thank you so much for the major help from blah 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 and so and give personal thanks and stuff, you can certainly do that too. But
that's the other way I've seen it done is author's notes at the end of the chapter. Either the end or the beginning of chapters. It's usually the end though. So.
We are going around, I believe you, sir, were next.
Yeah. How do you motivate yourself to write?
You get feedback from the community.
Honestly, it's different per person. Making the big time, no? What would be good?
Making the big time kind of is good for that because, but I guess it all depends on what you would, it's like, go to one of the other panels where it's like focused on what you're trying to write and where you're struggling to find motivation.
Literary merit might also be.
Yeah, literary merit might be a good place for that. But we'll actually, I think
have fun at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're having fun at it, motivation is not too hard to find. Time is harder to find than motivation.
Yes,
if you enjoy what you're doing.
Speaking of time, we do have 4 questions. So how about you come talk to me afterwards, and I'll try and get you.
Can I answer one quick thing on that?
Okay.
The other thing is to, yes, have fun with it, but at the same time realize that writing, especially if you want to do this because you want to do this as a thing, it's a job, and sometimes jobs aren't fun, but you still got to do them. So it's not finding the motivation. It's I have to sit down and I have to write 1,000 words before I'm allowed to have a bowl of cereal in the morning or something. I don't know. Find something that works for you.
If you like it, once you get started, it's easy to continue.
Right.
Write something else, because sometimes you
just need a break.
So we had a couple other questions up here. Not to interrupt, but we do have a limited amount of time.
So you guys touched on it earlier about their people's display pictures online, especially at forums, developing a presence, as it were. You also referenced the comic book art, but you didn't really go into touching on getting artwork for your pieces. So that's definitely a community.
That is. Artwork is interesting because the most common way you see it is either you follow a link from someone's art that you saw somewhere, or that they posted somewhere saying that I'm doing art, or you posted somewhere, hey, I'm looking for art. if you don't know them personally, a lot of times it'll end up in a commission, and that's just how it is. If you know people who draw, or you want to find someone, post a blog post, ask your friends, even if they're not into ponies, they might be willing to help you out, if they're real life friends and stuff like that. That's the simplest way to look for people. When it comes down to it, you can try to get recommendations from authors who've done stuff.
Yeah, and the other flip side of that coin is commissions. Obviously, you've got permission to use because you paid an artist to do them. And DeviantArt is a great place to do that. It's nice to be able to support other people in the DeviantArt community and just say, hey, can you do? And some of them will do commissions, some of them won't. So you kind of have to hunt around, find someone's artwork that you like, and just say, hey, I'm interested in getting a commission for this. I can pay you a few bucks or something. And some of them got set prices, some of them don't. Again, just haggle with them. The flip side of that coin too is a lot of artists out there don't mind if you use their artwork, especially on DeviantArt. But anytime you use their stuff, credit them. So if you use an image off DeviantArt, make sure it's in the story description that says cover art by and link their page on DeviantArt.
It's like Fanfiction has a built-in source feature.
Also, ask for permission first, because sometimes people who have done stuff as commission for someone else, are like, this is a commission for a different story. Maybe they made a description, or they put in the description of the art and you just didn't see it or something, or maybe they didn't. And they will say, go get permission from this person, or it's a recolor, because I've seen this too, where someone did a recolor and a different background for a thing, and they're like, this part's mine, this other part's someone else, I'm okay with you using my part, go ask them.
Yes.
So definitely, and make sure to credit them in the story description.
And that's a big thing in just the community in general, credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
So.
And if I may just put one more comment on that. For one of the stories I'm writing, I commissioned a recolor art from an artist on DeviantArt, and I was gonna pay him, but he liked my story enough that he did it for free, and then we did a signal boost both ways.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
Signal
and that happens.
Yeah.
Improve your,
I have a shameless plug. Jake and I here are actually working on other resources, more tangible physical goods. So we actually have free samples for everyone at you.
Cool.
Come get swag.
Sweet.
So people can come there. Let's do that
Yeah, I'll
after
catch
the
you by the
panel.
door.
Yeah, we got a few.
And you got a couple more.
Few minutes. I believe the next in line is super. Right there, and then. Okay.
I had a response to someone.
Oh, sorry. You can go ahead.
I've seen a lot of disclaimers on, various stories. I was wondering what the general consensus is on that. Just, the disclaimer like, Michael Pony is not.
It's all about your personal preference, I guess.
And that came
None
about.
of us are lawyers up here.
Are you talking about legal disclaimers about how it's copyrighted?
Actually, I have an answer for this. It initially came out of before there was really Fanfiction, and even before EQD, people were doing fan works. They did it. They had to include it in their story because now when you have Fanfiction and EQD, it's more understood that everyone who posts there basically is crediting Hasbro because it's a site dedicated to a show made by Hasbro and the production team on the show.
Right.
So you don't have to anymore. However, if you are doing it on a site that's not dedicated to My Little Pony specifically, like on fanfiction.net, credit them.
Yeah.
And say that this is a work of fiction. I didn't. A lot of the characters aren't my own.
And there's no harm in doing it if you want to be safe.
That's true. Yeah.
When in doubt, cover your flanks.
Yeah, again,
It's like I copy paste the same 4 lines from the bottom of old chapters into new ones, and just.
It can also help as a lead-in. People click on a story before they start, actually reading your story. They're reading a few words, and so then the intro, their brain's a little bit more in tune with reading, so that can actually be a little help there. Next.
I had something to say on writing magic. Is there a general consensus to how it's supposed to be written? Because you don't want to be Mary Seuss. You don't want to have this magic do anything, but
if it's not directly from the show, explain it and make it consistent. That's the 2 easiest rules. If you are going more in depth than the show, you have to explain it. And you know what? In some cases, that means you have to write an extra chapter. I think no, that wasn't you.
It's like first chapter of Past Sins. I was introducing
the ritual magic.
The ritual magic, which is it was. an old, like it's an abandoned form of art because it's all complicated. You have to do all the equations to figure out the symbols. Where unicorns can just cast a spell to cast a new levitation spell and do it in a slash.
Yeah.
And like getting extra magical aura energy or whatever you want to call it from zebra powders, because like how else is the core doing Nightmare Moon junk?
Right.
But
yeah, it's
and I think a couple of good examples on that type of thing. A good one that's pony related would be a Heart of Change.
And Moonstone Cup.
Okay, yeah, but then one that's not pony related that maybe more people can understand is if anyone's ever read the Aragon series, the Dragon books. He actually sets up a system of magic in that and says these are the rules. So there are definite rules, and doing anything that you couldn't do by some sort of physical means will kill you. There is no way around it. It will cost you your life if you screw this up. So, and whatever you do, it takes the same amount of energy. It just doesn't take the same amount of necessarily physical work.
You have to understand how it works because you're basically doing that. It's not just like, oh, these two things magically separate. It's like, no, it's the equivalent of you picking out each grain of sand from each grain of gold. I mean, we had a comment who was super tripling in the back.
Oh, if anyone wants money, I'll give a few good human Equestria recommendations. Not by me, I have
Okay. And it is the 2:31, so if anyone else has any, feel free to talk amongst yourselves.
Technically,
if we stay up here, come talk to us.
Yeah.
We're volunteering for